Before doing anything electrical, remember to turn off that circuit in your circuit panel, turn the breaker off.
Right here is the doorbell chime box, and you can just pull the lid off, and then you can unscrew these two wires here, and then the doorbell will no longer be powered. Safety first. These are the wires now disconnected, and you can test it by touching the doorbell, seeing if it rings. So this is where the doorbell is, and then the wire is right behind it. The Eufy camera doorbell says it should be 48 inches off the ground, and so this is approximately where it should be. And so I'm going to drill a hole using a hammer drill and a tungsten drill bit. I'm using a 3/16, and I'm going to actually drill at an angle towards this hole. But when I'm not going to go through the brick on this side. I'm actually going to go through it and then into the wood, and then I'm going to actually use a wood. I'm going to switch out the drill bit for a wooden drill bit, and then I'm going to go into the wood and try and connect the wire to the inside the door frame, in that door jamb area. I'm going to connect the wires there. This is what I mean. I'm going to go at an angle towards the doorbell, and then I don't want to protrude outside the brick. I want to actually go towards the wood and then switch out that drill bit. So I'm going to go at an angle towards the doorbell wiring. So this is how it turned out. You can see the hammer drill actually staying in the wall at an angle. And I chose to do it right here where the mortar is because it's easier than going through brick, but I still had to go through this brick down here. It actually broke free a couple times. It felt like it just went in and then went in again, but you can see how it's at an angle. And I'm using a 5 7/8 inch long drill bit, tungsten tipped, and it did pretty good. And I'm going to switch it out for a regular drill bit, use just a power drill, and then go through that wood. Okay, so I sliced off the crown molding, or removed the crown molding from the side of the door to locate the doorbell wire, and I used a file, a pointed end, to remove some of the foam insulation in between the wall and the frame of the door to find the doorbell wire. And the way you remove the molding is you take a box cutter and you slice down the side between the caulk and the wall. Same for over here. And you then I used a putty knife and a hammer. And I wedged it in both sides, and I slowly worked my way up the door to remove the molding, the hammer. And I also used this guy right here to kind of ply it away. So this is the doorbell hole. That's where the wire is going through for the doorbell. I was a little off. The hole that I made is right there. It's hard to see. Ah, there it is. So I came in a little too low. So that's the hole, and that's the other doorbell hole. So now I'm just going to unscrew the wires from the original doorbell, and then I'm going to connect the new wire to it and feed it back in through that hole and then through this hole. What I'm going to do is run the wire from the doorbell up and over and feed it to that existing doorbell wire that's going through that hole. So come in through there and then connect to that. So here I have 20 gauge 2-wire from Lowe's. That's the item number. I got 5 feet of it just to be safe. It was $1.40. So I just fed the wire through the hole that I drilled and to the outside. Okay, so now I have the wires This is one end, and then this is the other end that I was able to feed through. I'm going to connect these, splice them, I suppose, and then I'm going to use heat shrink wrap on both of the lines. And then I'm going to try maybe using electrical tape and then tape it all together so it really doesn't move. And then I'm going to feed it back in through the hole and then pull the extra wire out this hole. So I just removed the casing on these wires using this tool here. And then I'm going to cut some small pieces of heat shrink and I'm going to put it on that wire on each of them. And then after I'm done splicing the wires, I'm going to put this tube over them and then heat it up and shrink it on the wires. So I changed my mind. I stripped the casing off of these wires here, and I'm going to use the shrink wrap butt wire connectors, heat shrink butt connectors, to connect the new wires to the old wires. Now, I think when I do that, I'll have just enough room to turn these around so they can slide back in this hole. My goal is to put the wires back in this hole and then caulk these holes and make this look like it's never had a doorbell before. I decided to untwist these wires and slip on some heat shrink tubing and then put the heat shrink tubing over these guys and then heat it up some more. I think I'm going to give that a shot. I untwisted the wire and I slipped on the heat shrink tubing and I'm going to try and feed it on top of the butt connector. I'm going to try and shrink it over. And then once I do each, I'm going to shrink both of them together. I'm going to feed it back in through this hole. I successfully slipped the heat shrink tubing over the butt connectors, and I'm going to heat shrink it using a lighter. So this is them, and the tubing was shrunk over them. I got a little too close with the flame, so it charred the rubber a little bit. You want to kind of stay away from the rubber and with the flame and use the heat to shrink it as opposed to directly putting it in the flame, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to keep it like this. It feels tight, the wires feel good, and then I'm going to feed the wire back in through this hole and try and make it so these guys fit back in. I am feeding them one at a time back through. I'm going to try and turn them like this and then feed them back in. And then once I get both wires on the other side, then I'll twist them together and then feed them back through that hole right there. The wires are too thick to fit back through the doorbell hole. They both were able to turn around, but they both get stuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these both out. I'm going to try and drill at the very top another hole to widen and connect to this big hole. See if I can then slip the wires through. I took the wires back out and now I'm going to drill a hole at the very top of this big hole to widen it. The hole has been made a little bit bigger, so we shall see if it fits. Okay, so I was able to get the wires in there, and I used the back end of this drill bit to just kind of push them in. And so now the wires are kind of facing the right direction. They come up here, they come up from the bottom, and then turn inwards now. So they come out this hole here. From the outside they come in. Let me see if I can turn on my flashlight. Battery is too low. Okay. So they come in here, and I'm going to feed it into the hole right there. So here are the tube, the heat shrink tubing with the butt connectors and the wires. You can see it coming through the hole in the back and then coming out towards the camera. So now I'm going to use what they gave me in the Eufy doorbell package, the installation kit. It's this kind of blueprint you use to find the hole locations that you use to anchor in the doorbell. So I'm going to set that up. Now that the sticker is set and where I want it to be, I'm going to use my masonry drill bit and hammer drill to drill these holes. When I'm finished, I'm going to vacuum out the holes and then set in the anchors. And then I am going to use the screws. I decided to use the 15-degree angle setup. And so with this setup, I'm using the longer screws. And since I'm installing it in brick, I'm going to use these anchors. And then I'm using a 1/4 inch tungsten tipped masonry drill bit, and I'm going to use the hammer drill to drill these holes here and here, and then I'm going to vacuum out those holes to remove all the dust and debris, and then I'm going to set these anchors in. I inserted the drill bit, I tightened it, I'm going to set my depth here, and so I'm only going to go in a certain depth into each of these holes so I can set the anchors. So the drill bit danced a little bit for me, you can tell. I'm gonna see if it works out. This is how it turned out. I vacuumed it. It's a little crooked, you can tell. I feel like I'm never perfect when I'm drilling these holes in concrete, but for the most part it's close, and it kind of all worked out. I think it should be aligned. This is how I'm gonna set it up with the wedge, so it's angled more towards the door instead of straight on. It comes at an angle off the wall because in front of this door is a pathway, and that pathway tilts more to the left. So I'm angling it towards that pathway to catch people coming up to the door. At least that's the goal. The holes actually lined up pretty nicely, and there's some wiggle room back and forth here, as you can tell. If your screw holes aren't perfectly straight, you can kind of shift these left or right to make it more vertical. Once I have the unit actually attached, the doorbell camera actually attached to the wires and it's dangling, I'm going to actually caulk this hole just a little bit. I'm not going to put too much, but I want to seal it. I don't want any bugs getting in. I cut the wire here to about 3 inches, and I'm going to remove the casing on each wire, and then I'm going to attach it to the doorbell. I just finished the setup. I installed the app, and then I connected the doorbell to the correct Wi-Fi. It requires 2.4 hertz Wi-Fi, so not the 5G option, but the regular option to connect. And then I'm going to attach it to this guy. And then after I attach the wires, I'll put a little caulk here, and then attach it to the wall. I pre-bent these wire ends using some pliers so it can easily attach to the back of the Eufy doorbell. There's 2 screws. I'll show you what they look like. There's 2 screws here that those wires attach to. You want to make sure that no metal is touching between the 2 wires to prevent any short circuiting. So this is what it looks like. I just have to tighten the screws. But you see how the wire casing goes right up to the screw terminals? That's what you want. You want as little exposed wire as possible back there. When I put the doorbell on, it was a little tight on the edges here. The screw down here and the screw up here were too tight, and the brace on the back was bending, and so the bottom and the top weren't attaching. It was kind of like teeter-tottering a little bit, so I had to loosen the top and the bottom screws to make this backing more straight so this doorbell camera would attach. But it's pretty good on there. Feels sturdy. It doesn't shake that much. It's like pretty sturdy. Boop, 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 boop. So I think it's good to go. So what I'm going to do now is step 3, where I insert these cables on the Chime box. So mine basically looks like that, except the rear and the front are switched. And so on here, the front and the trans, which stands for transformer, which is down in the bottom right corner over here, we are going to use the cables to bypass the Chime box basically, so power isn't taken from the Chime box. It goes directly to the front, which is the doorbell connection. Doorbell button connection, and so that's what that cable does is it bypasses the Chime box basically. So it gives the doorbell camera more power. And it says it'll supply sufficient power. Without this step, video doorbell will still power on but will operate unstably. So that's why this is done. We're in the basement. The Eufy doorbell camera was giving us the error notification that there isn't enough power going to the unit, and so we have to change out our transformer, and that's located here. And it was in my basement, kind of directly under the doorbell chime box that's located in the hallway. And it says right there, transformer on the bottom right. So I'm gonna have to run to Home Depot and get the correct transformer. I'll show you the box once I get it, but I'm gonna switch this out. The circuit, I was trying to find the circuit for the doorbell, and I couldn't figure out how to turn the breaker off because I didn't know which circuit it was on, but it's actually on our basement circuit. So I'm gonna turn that circuit off, switch out this box, this transformer. It's actually, if you follow the line, it actually goes over to this light here, and then to the transformer. So I'm just going to disconnect it at the box here. I got this doorbell transformer here. It says works with any wired door chime, compatible with smart video doorbells. So it's a 30 volt amp transformer, 120 volt, 16 volt output to 30 volt output. This is what it looks like out of the box. So I disconnected the wires from the transformer output, and then there's also wire twists already inside. I'm going to disconnect. And then that's the back of the transformer. See what's holding it in there? That screw. And then I'm going to switch out these wire twists. I'm not going to reuse them. So I took the old transformer out. This box is acting as somewhat of a junction box. It has two sets of wires coming in, and then the transformer was also paired into it as well. So I'm going to have to bring the 3 wires from the transformer to these 3 sets and then twist them together. So I just placed the new transformer on there. It has a nut in the back that just fastens it on. You can see it here. You just put it through these wires up to here, and then it screws onto the back of the transformer. And this box is actually holding it on. So it's pretty nicely snug on there. I'm happy with it. I'm going to connect these wires, twist the wires together, put the panel back on, reconnect the wires to the doorbell, to the transformer, and it should be good to go. I'm going to use these wire twist connectors to connect the new transformer to the existing 14 or 12 gauge house wire that's running to the transformer. I'm going to remove the old one and put in the new one. This is what the twisted wire looks like, and then I've already put the twist connector on it and put some back inside of that receptacle box. But I twisted the wires first like this, and then I'm going to put the twist connector on it, and then it should be good to go. When I turned the power off, I used a piece of equipment to check if the lines were still active, so I didn't shock myself. I'll show you what I used. I used this, what is it? It checks if there's still voltage going to it. A voltage tester. You just do this, and then you check the connectivity of the wire. And then if it stays green, you're good. If it turns red, there's still power going to it. So this is to ensure that I don't electrocute myself. So after switching out the transformer, I removed this bypass wire before turning the power on, because I want to see if this current setup is sufficient in terms of powering the doorbell camera, and if this may not be needed, but if it is needed, the doorbell will still tell me there's not enough power going to the unit, and then I can put this cord back in. So I changed out the transformer, and now the chime box is buzzing. If you can look here, the piston on the right is vibrating. When it's touched, the buzzing stops. So I'm going to put the bypass back in, so hopefully it bypasses this chime box and the buzzing stops. So the buzzing stopped once I put that bypass back in, and that column on the right is no longer moving. I rang the doorbell again and everything still works. So what I'm going to do is, on the molding, I'm going to remove the old nails here that are up and down the molding, and I'm going to prep the inside wall as well to put the molding back on. I'm going to use this to scrape off the old caulk here on the wall so I can prep the surface for the molding being put back on. I scraped the caulk off the wall. I took some pieces of drywall with me on accident all the way down, and then I also did the trim or the molding. I did each side. I took the caulk off of each side. I am holding the trim on with clamps in the desired location. And then I'm going to nail it in and then caulk it. So I'm going to use this nail punch kit. I'm going to use this one on the left here, and I'm going to go over each of these nail holes that were made. This one I kind of messed up on, but the point is to drive them in just a little further, and then so I can caulk those holes and then paint over them. I'm going to caulk the sides. This is how it turned out. It's a little bit loose at the top. I mean, not loose, but there's like a gap there. Then I'm also going to caulk this side too, and I'll paint over it. Alright, now I'm going to caulk it. This is the caulk that I'm doing. I got it at Harbor Freight. I'm just going to go on both sides of the molding, and I'm going to fill the holes in on the outside as well. The molding was put on and caulked. That's what it looks like. Now it just needs a fresh coat of white paint.